Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the RIS News Channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Now let's go back to that breaking story about Guinea before we come round to discuss some of the submissions by Femi Falana SAN. A coup has occurred in Guinea as the country's special forces claim to have captured President Alpha Condé and overthrew his government. Lieutenant Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, commander of the Special Military Forces, has appeared on state television, sandwiched by his colleagues, to announce the apparent overthrow of President Condé, whose third-term ambition had unleashed national division, violence, and killings during the last presidential controversial vote last October. 83-year-old Condé has ruled Guinea with an iron fist since the year 2010. It is unclear where Condé is being held, and the security situation in Guinea remains uncertain, while the broadcast by Lieutenant Colonel Doumbouya followed heavy gunfire around the presidential palace in the Kaloum district of the Guinean capital, Conakry. We bring you details as events unfold in that West African nation. Well, Professor Akintenwa, let me start with you. This is another illegitimate takeover of government in West Africa. And Alpha Condé, dictator, more or less, you know, since 2010, 83 years old. In the last election in 2020, he had to adjust, manipulate, revise the constitution to give him a third term in office. And at the time, there were complaints that this is another case of an African ruler who wants to stay there almost forever. Now you have this coup that has occurred, but that doesn't make it right, whether it's a sit-tight leader or not. Any unconstitutional takeover of government is against the constitutive protocols of both the ECOWAS and also the African Union. But what is likely to be the role of France in this? Because France is the big elephant in the room. France, ECOWAS, and the African Union. Let me start with you.
The problem may not be as easy as rightly and well analytically presented. Take a foundation from the coup in Mali and the role of the ECOWAS. You discover that in Mali, you have the coup on the one hand, and you have the unconstitutional change of government as espoused by the ECOWAS in particular and the African Union in general. Now, when there's a conflict between the two, on the one hand, you have the people supporting the coup d'etat, and then you have the governments of the African countries saying no constitutional change of government. What do? In Guinea, now we have the president, Condé, now, who has done whatever is humanly possible to ensure a third term, right, which is not provided for. But you are now trying to use what I've always called a manu military approach to change the constitution to favor you. And the people are against. Now, how do you balance this type of situation? The coup d'etat in itself, yes, it's not constitutional. Agreement is that you will not have a change of government by use of force, by unconstitutional means. But when, for instance, the president of a country, himself, herself, is now trying to stay in power by using the same manu military approach. So how do you balance the two? So the governments in Africa cannot purport to be protecting the interests of the people by giving active support to presidents that want to die in office. All these sit-tight politics in Africa, I think we have come to the boiling point where it has to be jettisoned.
Well, Professor Ariole?
Well, you see, it's not the first time it's happening in Guinea. We have had the Daddy's Camara case, where he was also removed because some senior military officers, general for that matter, felt that they wouldn't have allowed the ordinary captain to take over power. And this time around, you have a lieutenant colonel who is just not even, as I was meant to know, is a French legionnaire. He's not even a constituted military person in the Guinea situation. And I'm very sure that there are other brigadiers and generals who will be saying, no, we will not allow this to happen. And it's like what happened in Mali seemed to be taking shape in Guinea. But Guinea and Mali, they are not completely the same. Although there happens to be a government that were formerly aligned to Russia. And French seems to be the government they don't like to see. French government, in effect, both in Guinea and Mali, the French government seems to be the government they don't like to see. But unfortunately, French has been involved in reorganizing the Guinean military as of recent. And we know that not quite 2 months ago, a former president of France was in Guinea with Alpha Condé, trying to review certain things. People were worried about his presence. And this is the man who overthrew Gaddafi in Libya, who planned the removal of Gaddafi in Libya. So the presence of Sarkozy and the current coup in Guinea is creating a big problem. But I'm only foreseeing a situation where they will still return Alpha Condé based on what they have seen, the French people have seen, and Sarkozy's presence there, either trying to inform him of this current coup that just have happened, and they would be also in position maybe to write it or to allow it to go. But we know also that Condé has also, felt that Senegal, their bordering Senegal was a bit interfering in their affairs, and they blocked the border with Senegal. So I wouldn't really say that the coup, for now, is just a developing event. I wouldn't say it's going to be something that will be very, very complete. It will be very, very catastrophic, and is expected, because I don't see Alpha Condé going away from power just like the Malian president Keita went away from power the way this man Goita took over power. This current one in Guinea is going to be a bit catastrophic, and I expect Alpha Condé to come back.
But you see, the point you are making is that as much as it is valid, French position on Guinea is going to come directly in conflict with the position of the ECOWAS. And in this particular case, the problem still remains how to balance non-change of government unconstitutionally. Now, the French may want to have Condé to remain in power. All right? That may be consistent with the position of the ECOWAS. But the problem is that what is the position of the people? The people of Guinea, the Guineans.
Yeah, but the Guineans they are completely helpless. For almost since Sekou Touré, they have been helpless.
Well, Professor Akintewa and Professor Ariole, let me bring in Yemi Adamolekun to have a view on the developing situation in Guinea-Conakry. Yemi.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Okay, good. You can hear me. Excellent. Interesting. My father's actually one of my father's first books, if not his first, was called Sekou Touré's Guinea. And it's very interesting how I'm just reading on the continent, really, just how oh, you can't hear me. Professor Akintewa, I could hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you here in the studio. Professor Akintewa, are you hearing her?
I'm not hearing.
You are not hearing her. She was just talking about Professor Ademolekun's book on Sekou Touré's Guinea.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes. We would like to hear you.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So, I mean, but just a slight diversion around not this particular case, but just the unfortunate history of the continent. I mean, it was just today that I realized that AU chairmanship is 1 year. So, I mean, it's interesting that they want to rotate power in that space, but they are quite keen on sitting tight when it comes to their nations, even if it's illegal. And then also then the AU and the ECOWAS, as Professor Mr. Falano had said, are quiet and turn a blind eye when their colleagues are misbehaving. I mean, a big thank you to Mr. Falano. I literally can listen to him speak for hours, just sort of his knowledge of the law and how he's able to connect it to current happenings. But the larger issue, and I think the larger lesson for us as a people from Zambia, which has now changed from opposition to incumbent governorship or people in power 3 times, to a place like Guinea, where against the citizens, you decided you wanted to sit tight, to a place like Rwanda, who, in a sense, I think Kagame is now on his 4th or 5th term or whatever it is, but you don't have a popular uprising for a variety of reasons. But the end result is that there is development. A lot of people talk about the ease of doing business in Rwanda. Rwanda has the highest number of women in parliament across the continent. So the trajectory of Africa post-independence is really quite painful to watch. Those who were opposition leaders, and you have them from Mugabe to Museveni, who then come into power and decide that's where they're going to die, or that's where they're going to set up shop forever, to very few examples like your Botswana and maybe Ghana now that people mention, who are actually trying to develop the country. And this is a continent that is so blessed, not only with human capital, but also natural resources that, and maybe that's why it has made us lazy, because we have free things we can sell and we don't have to tap into the value that we have. So yes, I'm not talking about Guinea in particular, but just really the larger lesson around the continent, around how we've allowed ourselves to be governed by rogues, really, for decades. And now, as younger people are beginning to pay a bit more attention and speak out, but unfortunately, that's where I wanted to land. That even as upset as we are at the type of rogues that have led us, in places like Botswana, we've seen people use the instrument of a democracy to vote people out of office. But then the parallel in a place like Guinea is where it is then the military that, in a sense, come in and, which was Nigeria's story for many years, which then come in and people are now jubilating because they have a change that they want, but not necessarily probably in the manner that they would have liked to have it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that the situation in Guinea-Conakry is still a developing situation. All we can do is, one, to condemn unconstitutional, takeover of power. And it's unfortunate that there are reports that lives were lost in that, military attempt. And also, we need to avoid speculations. But we keep, watching brief on developments in that country. But what is very clear, of course, is that this will be a major setback, not just for Guinea, but also for the West African sub-region. When you consider the fact that, there are issues about banditry and terrorism also in Guinea-Conakry. And this can only further destabilize that country. Well, let's move on. We have another breaking news before we return to the interview with Femi Falana, SAN, which we started. We understand that about an hour ago, former president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, has been placed on medical parole. That's according to the Department of Correctional Services. The statement reads, medical parole's eligibility for Mr. Zuma is impaired by a medical report received by the Department of Correctional Services. Apart from being terminally ill and physically incapacitated, inmates suffering from an illness that severely limits their daily activity or self-care can also be considered for medical parole. End of quote. Zuma's medical parole means that he will complete the remainder of the sentence in the system of community corrections. Again, let me start with you, Professor Akinterewa. After that ruling, on the contempt of court against former President Jacob Zuma, there was a lot of tension in South Africa. There were persons who, in fact, rioted in this part of the country, and it became a big political dilemma for the government of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Do you think this is a case of political pragmatism, or the Department of Correctional Services, applying, a regulation within its own enabling act? Because a person can be on medical parole for as long as 24 months or more. The Department of Correctional Services of South Africa is empowered to do that. But there are conditions. You can only be recalled if you violate, the conditions attached thereto. So does it seem now that former President Jacob Zuma has been able to escape the long arm of the law, especially the ruling, sending him to prison for contempt of court?
I will say again that you cannot be more correct, but with a caveat. In this case, it is more of an enablement of the law of the land. The correctional services are actually implementing the rule of law, and this is the beauty of it. Jacob Zuma is a very good prisoner, in the sense that he knew what he had done wrong. He initially refused to comply. At the last minute, he decided to submit himself, especially for the contempt of court. The real matter, the issue of corruption, is still outstanding, is still there. Medical parole here, as you rightly pointed out, is that, okay, since he is suffering from a terminal illness while he's still under, incapacitation, I think that it is a good thing for him to have been allowed to go back home, but the caveat still remains that the tenure, the term of the jail must still be complied with. You can try to go away, seek redress, have a comfort back home, but you are still under detention. The only thing is that, yes, you can have a house arrest instead of being within the four walls of the prison. So I think that there's a major important lesson for other African leaders, particularly our leaders in Nigeria, that look, you can be president, but you are not above the law. And the extent to which, for instance, you can try to manipulate, the French will call it magouille. Now, the extent to which you can engage in magouille is at best very limited, and that's what the South African experience has given us. And I want to commend the people of South Africa, the politicians, the judiciary, the correctional services, for playing greater emphasis on the rule of law. In South Africa, rule of law comes first. National security interest follows. In Nigeria, it is national security interest first, rule of law thereafter. No, it shouldn't be that.
Well, before I come to you, Professor Ariole, let me go back to Yemi Adamolekun. 15 months jail time. President Zuma has spent only 2 months. The better part of that in hospital. He underwent surgery. Now he's been placed on medical parole. Looks like he will serve the remaining part of his 15-month, prison term at home in Ndakla, his hometown. What do you think?
I mean, I would have to agree with Professor Akinteriwa that at least it's the law working. He's an elderly man, so yeah,
he's 79.
Be ill. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm not quite sure what the average age, age. There's a word for it. It's where you talk about the average term that people live in South Africa. Anyway, life expectancy. Thank you very much, Mr. Vatani. I don't know what the life expectancy is in South Africa, but he is elderly, and so the fact that he's ill, and I'm sure there were proper medical records and proper medical checks. Unlike here, where it's just the fact that you're appearing in court, you're suddenly in a wheelchair, your arm is in a cast, and you're saying, "Oh, where is me? I have a headache." At least he got into jail before medical checks were carried out, and then he's under house arrest. And so it is and I think really it goes back to this point that Mr. Fala made very clearly about our judiciary. lawyers and judges in cahoots, because for those displays of drama that we see, or was it the NDC, funny enough, the NDDC report, was it not the NDDC guy who suddenly fainted when they started asking him questions about where money is?
Professor Ponde, that's his name, Professor Ponde.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't remember. I remember him fainting. His name, something I want to remember. But just to, as I can tell you last point, it's good to see it play out. He was convicted. So whatever house arrest or not is on your record. Number one, you went to jail. Number two, you are elderly. So the fact that you have medical issues, nobody is going to contest that. It didn't suddenly spring up that you were ill. And I think there had been notices that he had been ill or had issues for a while. So yeah, it is a good thing to commend and see. And just eventually in Nigeria, we'll get to a point where people who actually do commit, and these are not even small crimes in Nigeria. These are huge crimes against humanity. People are dying for the crimes that people are committing, and they must pay for them, and they will pay for them. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, Professor Ariole, before we go back to some of the issues raised by our main guest, Femi Falana, SAN.
Well, what Yemi and Professor Kiteri were saying the right thing. Yeah, it's not exonerated. That's the point. And that's very good for the South African justice process. But parole, medical parole, which is, in French, it's like parole d'honneur, which means he has to stay by what the medical term says. And then it's either he stays without talking or he stays as a sick person for the whole 15 months. And if 15 months elapses, and he's not done anything wrong to prove that he's really not medically fit, they could send him back to the prison now. That's what medical parole means, as far as I'm concerned. So he must live by what medical parole means, which means he must stay as somebody who is not very fit to come out and create problem for South Africa. Of course, his personality says a lot, being a past president. But the problem the South African people are complaining about is that it is not only Zuma that's supposed to be brought to justice. That within Zuma, there are many people around who committed what, he helped them to commit.
The 15 months is still on the basis of contempt
of court. So not the real trial.
Yes, not the real trial.
So that's the basic.
Anyway, what has been established in South Africa is that nobody is above the law.
Yes,
that's that the law is no respecter of persons.
Yes, so.
And if a former president can be sentenced to a jail term, then it means, of course, that whether President Zuma is now on a medical parole or not, the point has been established by the judiciary in South Africa. And of course, there is a precedent, a gentleman called Shaik, who was a close business associate of President Zuma, who was sentenced in 2005. Before now, was also granted medical parole. And that's why Arthur Fraser, the head of the Correctional Services Department in South Africa, is saying that the Department of Correctional Services has acted appropriately within the framework of the law. Now, let's take on some of those issues that we discussed earlier on with Femi Falana, SAN. This is the first one. In a move least expected by many Nigerians, President Muhammadu Buhari, during the week, carried out a slight cabinet reshuffle, dropping 2 ministers and redeploying 2. Saleh Maman, Minister of Power, and Sabo Nanono, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, were both shown the way out of the Federal Executive Council. Femi Adesina, spokesperson to Mr. President, explained that the 2 ministers were not removed due to poor performance, as been insinuated in some quarters. He said the decision was to consolidate on what he described as legacy performance and projects of the Buhari administration. Well, we discussed that earlier on with Femi Falana, SAN. Yemi Adamolekun, you've already responded to some of the issues raised by Femi Falana. But, this particular issue was something he also addressed. And he said, look, it doesn't quite go far enough, and it's too little, too late. What do you think? And do you agree with Femi Adesina that they've not been removed because of poor performance? Because many Nigerians are saying, well, Nanono half of the time was asleep. And Saleh Maman was leading probably the most problematic ministry, and it could not make any sense. Many Nigerians remember Minister, as it then was, Nanono, for approving money for the building of a mosque. and for not even knowing enough about what was going on in his ministry. The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria was doing more for agriculture than the man who was going about with the bogus title of Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. What do you think?
Indeed, thank you. I mean, we laid the foundation, and it just reinforces why Femi Adesina likes to play with the truth or try to play fast with the facts of the matter. These are facts that you've laid out. And in his own words, as you've just quoted, he said it's meant to consolidate on the legacy of performance and achievements. I'm sorry, English is not my first language. If you are trying to consolidate on performance and achievement, do you remove the people who are contributing to that legacy? Or you leave them so they can continue to work? So if you are trying to consolidate on legacy and performance, what that would tell me by removing people is that these people are not adding to our legacy. They're actually not helping our ministry. So let them be going. The same, well, even though the ministry is not really, well, anyway. So according to Femi Adesina, he contradicted himself, because in the action of removing them, you are saying to us as Nigerians that if we want to consolidate on our legacy, these two men are not helping us achieve that purpose. So we're exiting them. That's what makes sense to me. So I don't know why he's trying to lie or cover, or maybe not, let me not say he's lying. How he's trying to reimagine the facts that he himself has stated. So I completely agree with Mr. Falana. It's not just a little too late, but it makes no sense. The man has been sleeping for 2 years. You want to remove him 6 months before, 1 year before we start campaigning for 2023. Hasn't been, and then the second man, Minister of Power, I'm sure Minister Fashola was probably just had a smile on his face. Maybe they said he didn't perform, they removed him. They've added this one now, they've removed this one. So let's see who they're going to put there for the last 1 year of a ministry that's supposedly getting some money from CBN as intervention. I mean, this is another thing that we do. Our discos are private entities, for the love of God, but constantly getting intervention. Government has, 40% shareholding. The discos are going to court because they don't want to open their books, yet taxpayers' money is pumped into them to support them. But anyway, to the ministers, yeah, I don't think Femi Adesina was speaking the truth, and I completely do agree with Mr. Falana. And I mean, while we're at it, and I think that also speaks to this administration in terms of transparency, why is there not a scorecard on audit? Do they have KPIs that, okay, as a minister, you should have done X, Y, and Z, and because you haven't done it, this is what's happening? But then again, our president is the Minister of Petroleum Resources, who gladly told us that they finally turned a profit after 44 years, but we still have not seen the books. So, hey, maybe he should be relieved, because I'm not sure he's helping their legacy. I'm just saying. Using Femi Adesina's words. Just saying. Mr. Bati, move away from me. Don't get me in trouble. Go, move away from me.
Professor, really?
Seriously, they are very disturbing trends. Because if you have about 40 people in the cabinet and or above 40, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, and you are removing only 2 when you have 50% of the time to go, it means you have passed, you're giving yourself almost 70% mark of performance. You know, Nigerians would have expected removal that makes sense, that shows that, okay, the remaining 2 years, we know we are consolidating with people, or we are trying to renovate the cabinet and see how, you know, we can upgrade our performance. But as it is, I don't know what exactly the criteria are that remove the 2 people. Because we were told that out of the 46 sectors we have in checking the performance of Nigerian GDP, only 3 perform. So if only 3 perform, it means only 3 ministers, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just saying only about 3 ministers have performed so far in whatever they are doing in the cabinet. The remaining one should...
No, the presidency did not say only 3 ministers.
No. I say the sectors. I'm talking about sectors, GDP and sectors now. People, economists have said that only 3 sectors in Nigerian GDP that help Nigerian GDP to grow up to 5%. That's what I heard.
What was said was the non-oil sector.
Yeah, only 3.
And those sectors performed
agriculture
because of the deep dive base effect year on year. You know, that's what I'm
trying to say is that whatever they say, it means that only 3, at least, whatever be the case, would have been, maybe if they are part of criteria of examining how minister, just like Yemi said, what is the scorecard for us to know performance evaluation, right, like they do every year in a ministry, performance evaluation, although they score people everywhere and it doesn't really make sense. It's almost the same thing like we are seeing in the president's cabinet. And it's unfortunate because 2 years to go, 50% of the time is gone. What are you going to do with about 75% of members in the cabinet who are not showing any sign of effective performance? There would have been more of a removal, then we would know. Even when it says a continuous issue. Continuous issue till when? Till the last day of the cabinet, unless there is an agenda that we don't know. God help us.
Well, for clarification purposes, what the GDP report for Q2 2021 stated clearly is that there was growth, significant growth in the non-oil sector. And this will cover agriculture, transportation, manufacturing, telecommunications, insurance, yes, services sector. Now, so all of that, you can't collapse into three sectors.
They come to three sections.
Anyway,
yes, they come to three sections.
Don't let us split air.
No, we don't go there, but that's what they said.
You also recall that in 2019, towards the end of 2019, President Buhari had introduced that ministers will be assessed on the basis of performance. Mm-hmm. He said he wanted to know the key performance indicators.
Exactly.
Not just for ministers, but also in the various ministries, departments, and agencies. And the question that many Nigerians are asking is that, look, the offloading of these two ministers, is it as a result of that evaluation process? And there are many Nigerians who believe that if it is the evaluation process, in their own reckoning, they think more ministers should have been sent adrift. And that in any case, if the president says it's a continuous process, when will he decide on who else should go, considering the fact that he has a constraint of time?
Sleeping process.
I think that clarification is important. Professor Akintenewa, your take on this before we take on some of the other issues raised by Femi Falana.
I would like to give a footnote to the explanation of Yemi. And as you will say, well, she cannot again be more correct. This is a question of English language. To buttress what you have just told us rightly, I quote one paragraph in the statement of Mr. President as given by Femi Adesina. Quote, 2 years and some months into the second term, the tradition of subjecting our projects and programs implementation to independent and critical self-review has taken firm roots through sector reporting during cabinet meetings and at retreats. These significant review steps have helped to identify and strengthen weak areas close gaps, manage the economy, and improve the delivery of public goods to Nigerians. Now, Femi Adesina has told us that the removal is not in any way connected to performance. And he talks about conjectures, talking about conjectural analysis. On the basis of that, he has concluded that a conjecture remains a conjecture and never a fact. So, in this case, deductive methodology has clearly shown that, look, with this type of statement, if you are talking about evaluation, you are talking about self-review, you are talking about removing weakness, then it goes without saying that the removal of the two ministers cannot be separated from weakness. One does not need to have a PhD in English language to understand. And again, there are many ways of saying things. You can use image, you can use signals to communicate. The president does not need to say directly that I am removing you because of this. And as a matter of fact, the question to ask is, if performance is not the issue that explains the removal, then we should be asking question, what really is the reason? Why only those two people at this particular material time?
Well, let's move on. I guess that as you have said, many Nigerians expect that more ministers should go so that the president can properly begin to consolidate that legacy. Unfortunately, when ministers are appointed, some of them are so foreign to the assignment that they take almost a year to settle down. By the time they do that, in about 1 year, you know, the government will be already a lame dog as Nigeria slips into, you know, an election campaign mode. Maybe that's why the president decided to redeploy persons from within the system to replace the ministers that were sacked. But even those two ministers that were redeployed, nobody has any
information about
any great impression about them. But that's fine. There will be more than enough time to do a proper assessment of the president's legacy. Let's move on to another subject that was discussed at length by Femi Falana SAN when he was on the show. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Tanko Muhammad, summoned 6 chief judges of state high courts in Rivers, Kebbi, Cross River, Anambra, Jigawa, and Imo states to a meeting to find a solution to the trend of conflicting orders being issued by certain judges. The recent conflicting order was issued by Kebbi State High Court in Benin Kebbi to nullify a previous order issued on August the 24th by the Rivers State High Court in Degema, which restrained the embattled chairman of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Prince Uche Secondus, from parading himself as chairman of the party. Well, I mean, in the course of the conversation with Femi Falana SAN, I made a point that in spite of the CJN and the NBA condemning forum shopping, abuse of the judicial process, and judges dispensing court injunctions as if they were issuing penance, you know, the issuance of ex parte orders, you know, has continued within the last week, and yet under certainly equally controversial circumstances. Femi Falana was very optimistic that, look, sanctions can be imposed, and both the NBA and the CJN, or the NJC as it were, you know, can stop this return to the ugly situation we used to experience in the past. Yemi Adamalekun, let me start with you. Are you as optimistic as our guest?
I mean, as with anything, when there are no consequences, bad behavior continues. And Mr. Falana's point was that when a judge was actually removed from the bench for issuing an ex parte order, that there was a period where the practice stopped. But again, when someone tries it and nothing happens, and someone again tries it, nothing happens, then it continues. So his optimism is based on the fact that I've seen it happen in the past. And if these disciplinary measures are taken, at least they will curb it. But if we then build on it being curbed and make sure that it is a practice that is not allowed, and a practice that immediately another judge grants it, the judge is immediately petitioned and removed from the bench, then people will know that there are consequences. What I hope would happen is that a combination of the CJN, INEC, I mean, let's even be fair to the CJN. Well, let's not be not fair. Leading up to the 2019 elections, there were practice guidelines issued stating that ex parte orders should not be granted for leading up to the elections. But some judges clearly violated those practice guidelines. But did anything happen? No. So, and this is Mr. Falana's point. It didn't happen leading up to 2019. So 2019 to 2021, we have continued the practice. So the NBA, I think my direct call to the NBA is that, as Mr. Falana said, as we lead up to the 2023 elections, between primaries of parties, I think in Lagos today there were parallel primaries, if I'm not mistaken, or parallel congresses, if I'm not mistaken, or you and a few other states. Between those things, between the judiciary determining who are the executives of a party, then determining who the candidates of a party are, and then now determining who we voted for. If we don't want to walk that line, the NBA and the CJN and the National Judicial Council must really make that mark now. For those who have violated the law, so to speak, both lawyers and judges, the penalty must be quick, must be swift, and must be clear. so that the message is sent very clearly that we shall not use the judiciary to determine the outcomes of our elections. And I think citizens and even CSOs, myself and the organization I lead included, must engage the NBA and the CJN. And it's either writing formal petitions against lawyers that we know have practiced this and against judges that have given this judgment as citizens of Nigeria or players in the electoral space to say that, look, don't go too far. This is your name of 10 lawyers. And I think it's critical what Mr. Falana said, that these are not just your briefcase lawyers who are getting these injunctions. And again, I like to his point that he doesn't have evidence of corruption, but it is said within the sector that that's why it's called procurement. That's why it's called forum shopping. When you shop for something, you buy it. You don't shop and you get it for free. So that's why those phrases are used in connected to this practice, that it's a transaction. So if it's senior lawyers who understand the law, as Mr. Falana clearly stated, but choose to disobey the law and go around forum shopping, then it even makes it more critical that they must be made scapegoats. So we're not talking about a briefcase lawyer that nobody cares about and nobody knows their name. So if you disbar him or you penalize him, people just shrug and move on. But if the lawyers involved are people who are named and known and standing members of society and they pay this price, then it will send a very strong message that Nigeria will not allow you making money because you are a lawyer. So you're being paid for this service. So let's not even forget the judge part of it. As a lawyer, it was a paid service. So they paid you to go and violate the law, to to then request for an ex parte order. And they should pay that penalty. And hopefully that will send a strong message within the bar and the judiciary as a whole.
Well, Professor Akintenwa.
In this case, let us ask as a layman, is it legal, for instance, to ask for a motion ex parte? This question will look funny. The answer naturally will be, yes, it is legal. You can ask for a motion ex parte. Whose right it is to grant the request for a motion ex parte? Femi Falana has reminded us that, look, it falls within the exclusive competence of the justices. Now, in this case, if it is lawful to ask for a motion ex parte, and the request is made to a judge, all right, of a competent court, and this same judge, this same justice grants the request, on what basis are we seeking to sanction somebody who has lawfully made a request and for a justice that has similarly and respondingly granted that? Why I raise this issue is that the government of Nigeria itself, and it is quite made evident in the submissions of Femi Falana, has been involved in this ex parte motion magui. Mm-hmm. The government who is sanctioning the government of Nigeria? Dr. Abati, in passing, told us in the course of this discussion about, I think it's Justice Sekpeme. You know, when the annulment of election result was to take place, this was done at dead midnight. Dead midnight. By that time, it was around, they began to congregate as from 11:30 p.m. Until around 1 a.m. to take, in order to grant this type of ex parte motion. This is fraud. Now, when Femi Falana tells us that he has not seen any evidence of corruption, probably in the specific case that we have mentioned, but all along, we have been operating a very fraudulent system, and the government is deeply involved in that. So I do not see how anybody can be hopeful and be optimistic when, for instance, the principal stakeholders, the government, the judiciary, the bench, the lawyers, all those things, they are involved. So this is the problem. Institutional corruption under President Muhammadu Buhari has reached its crescendo. And this is most unfortunate. Unless this issue of institutional corruption is taken very seriously, not with kid cops, no, we wouldn't have any brighter days coming. It was Jimmy Cliff who in one song said, better days are coming. But where are the better days coming from in Nigeria?
Well, very quickly, Professor Ariole, so that we can take our final topic of the day.
Everything seems fraudulent. You know, it seems, by the way, military says obey the last order. Now, lawyers are saying ex parte motion. As far as I'm concerned, it's like contaminous with obey the last order, which means the last court that decides what happens becomes the last order to be taken. I'm worried because, you see, Femi Falana mentioned jurisdiction. And by my own knowledge of what jurisdiction means that you have a limitation. You don't go beyond your boundary. If you are in a state that ordered that motion to be carried out, why should it go beyond that state? I don't know, but that's lawyers. You are lawyers. You should know. I mean, if you mention the language jurisdiction, it implies authority that is limited. That should not go beyond the other person's area of jurisdiction also.
No, jurisdiction can be ambivalent in this case.
How can it be ambivalent?
No, jurisdictional competence at the level of the judge, all right? In
coordinate court, they are saying.
Yes,
now.
You see the geographical scope all along, as distinct from the jurisdictional competence of issues involved.
Yeah.
For instance, there are some issues that a court may not have the right to address, to listen to. As distinct from...
Would be geography does not define jurisdiction
there will
this
be
time
enough
around.
time to debate the Nigerian legal system.
Very, very problematic.
Is at the heart of the judicial process. Let's take our final topic. The U.S. ambassador to Nigeria, Mary Beth Leonard, said that country is ready to help Nigeria identify sponsors of terrorism in Nigeria, particularly the Boko Haram group. Ambassador Leonard made the declaration during a roundtable on U.S.-Nigeria military cooperation with journalists in Abuja last Monday. As good as this may sound, many Nigerians are doubtful if the federal government will be willing enough to cooperate with the United States in doing this. Well, Yemi, let me come back to you very quickly. We have just a few more minutes left. Should the Nigerian government cooperate with the United States to identify and name those who are sponsoring the Boko Haram in Nigeria? Or do you think those who are skeptical that the Buhari administration will not take up the offer, do you think that they have any point?
Are you saying should they or would they?
Well, you can rephrase the question and answer it yourself. Please go ahead.
I didn't hear you. I mean, obviously they should, without a shadow of a doubt. Would they? And I guess is the million-dollar question. President Goodluck Jonathan, let's not forget, while he was in office, did say there are members of Boko Haram in his administration. He said that clearly. As far as I know, nobody was prosecuted, and I don't know anybody that's sitting in jail by being prosecuted and then jailed for being a Boko Haram enabler. We've seen members of the police force and members of the army protest either poor welfare in the security services and allude to the fact that the people in charge, their superiors, were not serious about prosecuting this war against terrorism. So it goes to say that there would be people who are high-ranking, who are also who are complicit in where we are now. I was on a show during the week where I said the Nigerian government is complicit, and somebody challenged me and said that's not true, because there are men and women of the armed forces who are giving their lives and doing their jobs. And I don't disagree with that at all. I actually do commend and I honor and salute those who every day want to defend the integrity of Nigeria and protect us from terrorists. But when you are serving under an administration that is silent, that is not transparent, that members within the security services are complaining about how they have been equipped to fight this war, then you have to say that the government is complicit. Because when you know what to do and you choose not to do it, in my limited English, as I said, English is not my first language, that means you are complicit. So for the Nigerian government, who I will say, this is again not an Arise opinion or Thisday Live, I am saying, for a Nigerian government that is complicit in this war on terror, would they agree with choose to work with the American government? I don't think so. Again, lastly, I'll remind us that when the Chibok girls were kidnapped, one of the reasons why America pulled back was that every time they gave the Nigerian government intelligence or the Nigerian security agencies intelligence about what they were tracking, Boko Haram or the girls and the Boko Haram would change tactic because the information was being leaked. So America said, we can't help you when you are, in a sense, helping our enemy. So in conclusion, I don't think the Nigerian government would choose to work with America. If they do choose to work with America, it will be on very interesting terms. But I think it does not preclude the US government from sharing the information that they know in their own interest, even if they're not doing it because of Nigeria or to help Nigeria, but in their own interest, it's something they can do even without Nigeria's help. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Professor Akintenwa.
I belong to the same school of thought with Yemi on this particular matter for an additional reason. There's no way President Buhari may want to accept any collaboration on this. Reason one, Commodore Olawumi has told us that they know the people who are responsible for aiding and abetting this. Theophilus Danjuma has told us about this. Malafia Obadiah has also reminded us and has predicted that, look, come 2022, there's going to be a civil war. So
I hope not. I hope not.
Well, it's a good hope. Now, in this particular situation, Nigerians do have an idea of who is who, but we do not know whether the United States will have different names as distinct from the names we are used to. And as Yemi rightly pointed out, that it is in the larger interest of the U.S. to have the names published, even though our president will not want to have that. To collaborate with the U.S. in this particular case will throw Nigeria into more trouble, especially that President Muhammadu Buhari has been accused of a Fulanization agenda, of an Islamic agenda. And in this particular case, the removal of the ministers and those who are likely to be removed, they are likely to be removed not because of this same lack of performance, to borrow the word of Femi Adesina in this case, but probably because these are people who will not be able to assist the achievement of the agenda of Mr. President. That's the way I want to conjecturally look at it. So in this case, whether or not the U.S. Wants to assist in this particular case, let's leave that one to conjectures this time.
Well, Professor Ariele, over to you. We have just about 2 minutes.
No, generally in Africa, people are skeptical about U.S. when they decide to come in. It's something they know, they understand. I mean, we see people being jailed in Dubai based on Boko Haram cases. Does it mean Nigerian government don't know the intelligence going on in Dubai?
Precisely.
I don't know. It's so funny, you know. And when I look at the body language of Senator Ndume, for example, for sure, Senator Ndume seems to be in very clean picture of what is going on. It's just that he is being inhibited. And maybe for the safety of Nigeria, so that Nigeria does not explode or implode, whatever, however you say it, he seems to be quiet. Seriously, because he was in the State House trying to defend the reason why people should not be absorbed in the Nigerian society who claim to have been fighting for Boko Haram. He said it. I said they should be prosecuted. Some of them should be prosecuted, which means he knows those that are very, very much linked with those who are really sponsoring it. I'm not saying, but I feel so. So he should be the one really leading us into knowing more. Not even America.
Those who have repented have just been reported to have engaged in armed banditry.
I mean, what are we talking about? And the problem
repentance
is that
followed by engagement.
By
where have they been kept? that they are able to go out again to engage.
They have seen that banditry is making more money than Boko Haram. So they will just, we are seeing it in the whole Northwest and Northeast that armed banditry is making more money. So it's capable of them coming out of Boko Haram to join armed banditry.
But what is important is that the Nigerian government must make this environment secure for everyone.
Exactly, we expect
it. And visitors alike.
Exactly,
because
not segregation.
That's the primary responsibility
of the government. Exactly.
And if persons have committed crimes, they should be brought to justice.
Thank you.
You've been watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next Sunday.